Well, hi, I'm Rick Dancer. And one of the things I'm doing this election is some of the lesser known candidates who are running, um, I'm giving them a voice. And yes, I'm picking people who call me and ask me because that's what I do. I'm not going out begging anybody to come on here and give their message. But for decades, I've said, do your homework. And how can you do your homework if all you have is a stupid piece of propaganda called the Oregon Voters Pamphlet? Just so you know, when you look in there, most of the stuff in there is paid for by people or organizations, and they can say whatever they want. There's no truth meter on the Oregon Voters Pamphlet. The only thing that's true is the two little comments up at the top that explain who this person is. Everything else, and if people are writing in things about these folks, it's probably not really those people. What they did to me when I never knew this, when I ran, they put editorials in the paper, and they wanted me to just, we were going to write them as a staff. This is how they do it, I guess, and then put somebody's name on it, get them to say, okay. And then they put their name on it. And I said, absolutely not. If somebody doesn't say anything, I'm not doing it. That is unethical and lying. So anyway, my whole point is, Tim LeMaster called me. He's running for House District 43, so it's not in my normal area, but we do reach into Portland. And so, Tim, come on and chat with us a little bit. I want people to get to know you because I think it's really hard in this day and age when with social media, people are just going to draw their own conclusions. You're running as a Republican. Tell me a little bit about your past and who you are.
Yes, sir. I really appreciate the opportunity here. As you said, us smaller, lesser known candidates, we're not getting the big money. Even the Republican Party really isn't supporting us. As far as they're concerned, largely
Yeah,
we're just cannon fodder to
I
make
know. I
the
remember.
Democrats spend. And they've literally said that and such. So, yes, sir. My name is Tim LeMaster. I'm running in House District 43, state representative for Oregon. House District 43 is inner Northeast Portland. It's pretty blocked out. It's basically I-5, 84th or I-84, and then the west, and then bordered by 43rd and 33rd. And the north half is basically Lombard. That's kind of the simplest way. And it's pretty squared out, not
And
all squirrely like some of the other gerrymandering done, because this is staunch blue territory.
highly blue, and you're coming in, and we won't mention your opponent's name because we don't have to, and who wants to give her the attention.
Sure.
But and now you're obviously service because you keep calling me sir, and I absolutely find that the most charming thing about people who've been in the service is they always call you sir. There's something very respectful about that. So who did you serve with? And oh, thank you for your service as
Thank you.
well.
Yeah, so I joined the Marine Corps right out of high school. When I was actually in the process of signing up, the Desert Storm was getting ready to kick off. My mom was very unhappy about that because I remember the news reports. They were people that may not remember, but the DoD ordered 100,000 body bags for that because we thought there was going to be chemical and viral warfare. I mean, anthrax shots and the whole shebang. It was pretty scary as it was ramping up, and then it turned out to be essentially a nothing burger. Just dropped a bunch of bombs, and that pretty much was a done deal. And such. So I was signed up during that time. I became a photographer in the Marine Corps, was a combat camera guy, enlisted as a private, and did photo, video, graphic production. Worked my way through the ranks, became an officer, a warrant officer, and then retired as a major at the top of my field.
So what makes you want to do this, to run for House District? What I already, before we went on here, I said, now you've had your head examined, you're not meant to have any mental issues that we know of or anything like that. And I can only say that because I did the same thing in 2008, ran for Secretary of State, never ran before, and experienced the same thing you're experiencing with, people think, oh yeah, the party's backing you. Well, no, it's like,
No.
but you saw a position that had no name in the Republican seat, and you're like, how did, that's not the way that this republic is supposed to work.
And that's really it. So first off, where I live about 5-6 blocks from the police station that was getting blasted night after night. Walk my dog by there, and there's burn marks going up the building that people are saying, well, they didn't try to burn it down. And I did. I had friends on Facebook saying, oh, they weren't trying to burn it down. And I literally snapped a photo and put it right there. So, well, there's the burn marks from not being burned, trying to be burned down. And the park that they gather is only a few blocks from my house as well. So kind of in the middle of it. And they'll gather at that park as well. at least back then, heading towards the police association, the other direction. So, we had all that chaos going on. 2 years ago, the election cycle played out. That's when I became more paying attention to local politics. My military life, I traveled the world. I was ping ponged all over the place. I'm a single guy, was a single guy the whole life in the Marine Corps. So local politics never really affected me, and it wasn't a thing. I 22 years adult, and it's just, the national news, because that actually impacted me at the federal level, politics and international such. So, settling here in Portland 9 years ago, over the years, I bought a house here, and the local stuff, like, I didn't realize what I was in for, with it all. And especially the last couple of years, just the insane chaos. And a big one right off the bat was just, I get the defund the police movement. I get that, there can be issues with police, and that's always an issue in communities when you got to keep that balance of proper policing and crazy cops. But, especially when they come out and the signs are abolish the police, and our local political leaders are standing next to those signs,
Right.
would just stun me. Where's the adults in the room saying, look, policing is an important function, and now we're suffering from it. We have record homicides, and it's record homicide in the Black community, the same community that supposedly was, supposed to be protected. This is the consequences of that. And it's just the whole mess of it. The taxes, businesses, it killed me during the shutdowns to go through town. I mean, it was personally disturbing. All of those businesses are a destroyed family.
Yeah.
Sorry, this one really gets me when I think of it. People don't appreciate what business owners go through and how tough it is for them. And these arbitrary lockdowns, there was no advocacy and common sense for those businesses. And every one of those doors is a life savings gone and a family destroyed. Excuse me. Damn. This one always gets me, because it really it was a ghost town going through. And that's what
Well, Tim,
yeah.
even like Bessie Johnson, who's running for governor, is talking about how devastating Portland. It's just, it looks like a shithole. And people drive through, and you can't even believe.
For my district, drive through is half the problem. I've talked to people in the Lloyd Business District. I've talked to people on Broadway, and that's inside. I mean, this is the heart where the convention center is. And this is where kind of the central tourism activity for the city is the jewel comes to play and do stuff. The convention center, they're not getting stuff in. Small coffee shop owner that I've gotten to know over time, he's struggling. And a core piece of his business was the downtown businesses. Well, COVID and the lockdowns and stuff took its toll. Fortunately, he was able to survive through that, but nobody's coming back into downtown. And it's a combination of things, the public safety. Businesses that are in the area can't hire people because nobody wants to park their car down there.
See, and I see people like current legislators, not necessarily your opponent. I haven't heard this from her.
Sure.
But I know that, current lawmakers are saying, well, we're getting back in line. Well, what happened? Isn't a leader somebody who doesn't fold to public opinion? And that when stuff starts to happen and things get hard, that's when you see who a true leader is. And who in the Democratic Party of Oregon led Oregon during that time. Everybody followed what one person was saying, and that was Kate Brown. None of those people stood up to her. And so to me, if people are now suffering through inflation, through high gas prices, through all these things going on, you need to look at who you're electing, because those people did nothing.
Yes, sir. And that's actually a big piece of when I've talked to folks, and is exactly that. There was no leadership in that respect. There's so much that, okay, they can agree with it, but at least, we shut down schools for 2 years. We affected an entire generation of families. Even so far, and I knew this was the case, I dug up the resource to be sure and sent it to a friend of mine, to the point that the governor literally told online schools they could not operate in the state. Now, how much sense
makes so much sense scientifically.
Right. And when you got something as so far out as that, and nobody in the powerful representatives, the one party domination, even so much as said, hold on, let's think about what we might be doing here. There
Right.
was nothing like that. And
They
that is
all
really
buckled and
disturbing.
put their tail between their legs, and they went along with what the status quo was because they were too afraid to be a true leader and stand
Yeah,
up.
I
Look
don't
at
know what their motives were, but it is, I mean, that
look at
was so bad.
so education too. Like I think Oregon now we ranked number 38th.
That's
How do
better than
you
I saw. I've seen most of what I've seen has been around 43rd to 47th.
so how do you feel about school choice?
Oh, I'm a big proponent of that. That made sense to me a long time ago, when I first kind of heard it. And I've seen some things that there's been, mixed success in various places. But what's there to lose? I mean, really, and my opponent is
Yeah.
one of them. Literally voted no literacy requirements for adults coming out of high school. Think about that. And it's because, and my understanding is it's directly a result because of the lockdowns. So the
Right.
lockdowns happened, the schools were shut down, pot and alcohol were put ahead of children's education.
Well, I've had teachers tell me that in their districts that they actually lowered. So what used to be a D or an F was now a C. So we rather than asking our children to kind of rise up to the occasion,
Yep.
we're dumbing down Oregon schools. And do you think voters? I mean, do you think voters are ready to go, especially in a very blue state like Oregon? I just saw an article where not Tina, excuse me, uh, Christina Drazen is the article. The headline said, um, Oregon, a state in the country that's always been blue, is looking pretty good towards having a red governor, and it was
Yeah,
Christine.
we could
Um,
end up turning purple. That's a certain possibility. Um,
so,
and to me, like one of the
what are
things
you
that,
hearing from voters, like especially your D voters?
so it's been pretty amazing. One story in particular, I'm a small guy, and it's literally just walking around, knocking on doors, and meeting people, and that's been amazing in its own right. I mean, who are the people in your neighborhood? And it's, that's just been great after this COVID lockdown to finally learn and to learn more about the history here. So people may not know this part of Portland. This is essentially the epicenter of the Black history in Oregon, across the good, bad, and the ugly. This is really the heart of it right here, and I was aware of the history, but to learn so much more and meet people, and it's not some long ago, Jim Crow 1800s type stuff. This is 1980,
Yeah,
1970, 1980, and even into the late 80s from stuff I've heard. I'm meeting people that are my age that as kids had to move 2 or 3 times because their houses were bulldozed thanks to government overreach of eminent domain done for the public good. So I've absolutely heard a whole lot of just being fed up, honestly, especially the defund police. It's shocking. I go easy with that one because it's so integrated with the Black Lives element and so on. But I've had people even blast all of it, just say that was so bad, so stupid. And many of them just saying, where was our officials standing there saying, hold on here. And
right.
with the police thing, one of the things that is not being talked about at all, it is touched on as far as demoralized, but there's kind of that two social contracts that a police have to balance between. You obviously have the people and the police, and that's always a balance. But and this makes me more concerned. As a military guy, I understand this. You're only as useful or as, valuable as your political leaders have your back. And I don't mean have your back as in, and of course not the wanton abuse that may happen and take place of the corruption, but who the hell wants, we had this big bubble of police that were hired in the early, I just learned this from a local retired fireman. We had this big bubble of this hiring bubble in the early 80s or so where the police force got built up. This defund the police and going after the cops and not supporting them and even going against them happens. And they're like, well, I've got a retirement waiting for me. I'm out. And that's decimated our police ranks by and large. And now who the hell wants to go work for a city that, your mayor doesn't even support you, at least has a history of not supporting and taking away the tools to even defend yourself?
I heard on a national radio show them talking about Portland, Oregon, and saying, the worst mayor in the country was Ted Wheeler because he went along with all this. And then even during the riots and stuff, remember the rioters turned on him.
Yep.
And then they went to his posh neighborhood and threw Molotov cocktails into the lobby of where he lives.
Yeah.
And now finally, 2 years later, he's decided, oh, maybe we need to do something about this.
Sure.
That right there should scare every citizen in Portland, just like that. And I think the problem in Portland that I see is that so many people, I have a kid that lives there, so many people live in outside areas and they go, oh, it's not bad here, because they're not in the heart of it where you are. They're not
Yeah.
in downtown Portland where you
Downtown
still
is
drive through and
horrible.
see a shithole with all the garbage laying around. And where were people when, we had the January 6th thing going on, which was horrible, but why were people complaining when that same thing was happening in Portland, downtown Portland, to the federal buildings?
Sure.
It's so
Yeah,
hypocritical.
a piece of that I was talking with friends of mine. I've got some good critical thinking liberal friends. They're out there, and like one of the things with that whole piece that I mean, seriously couldn't make sense of the police problems and the issues that everybody that was the concern of protests back then, and by and large primarily police corruption, that kind of thing, is a local issue. That's local. That's your mayors. That's your governors. Your governors for not, protecting the people of their state. The evil Republican president that's never been involved in politics. He's got nothing to do with the 20 years of people being killed in the streets or
Right.
being messed with the cops. And they're going after the federal building. Like, well, okay, you're kind of pointing at the wrong target here. And I certainly don't endorse or embrace them being violent against the mayor's house, but I was certainly at least okay, they're oriented on the right person that can affect the change that really needs to happen. And I wish I would have seen them going towards Kate Brown's neighborhood, because those are the key decision makers, and that's where you need to take those noise and do your protest, because they're the ones that can really affect the change. And it was just
Right.
odd that was not the case.
Not destroying innocent people who just are trying to make their business, especially during
Yeah.
the reaction to COVID, when these people were shut down in downtown Portland anyway, and now
Yeah.
you destroy them. How do you ever come back from that? And so what's the headline for Tim LeMaster? Like, what would you do? You write me a headline that people would see, let's say for COVID, what would you write?
For COVID, wow, this is tough. A little tough with like kind of improv off the cuff with stuff like that. Um, I mean, overall with COVID, I think for me it would be, unchecked government. What one of the piece that stunned me through that time, people are literally in the streets screaming about being anti-fascist, and the definition of fascist is government control over businesses. Like, that is the real definition. So
Right.
while they're screaming no fascism, nobody's like realizing that the government telling businesses and homes they're not allowed to operate and dictating the nuances of their operation is actually finding its way into actual fascism.
And many of you who are screaming at others for being fascists are actually supporting fascist behavior in our state.
And there's that, screaming at people. That's one of the things that's really unfortunate here. Yesterday, I was spent time in Dawson Park, and Dawson Park, for those that don't know, that's kind of it's a very significant, meaningful landmark for the historic Black community here. Like, this is where even folks that grew up here but have left the area, they come here and catch up with their friends, and it's really a meaningful place. I'm at an event there, and as I'm talking to people, I point out to them. We start talking, and when you come up about disagreeing with the typical progressive politics that play out here, all of a sudden everybody's voices kind of goes down. And I pointed that out to him. Said, look, the minute you step up speaking critical against a progressive idea, like, here we are literally getting quiet, looking both
Right.
ways to make sure who's
Mhm.
hearing us. And they agree. And people around here would like to put signs out and such, and people are scared of having their homes targeted because of that. And
I
it
have
happens. Business owners that support me, but they're scared to have anything in the windows because they've already been replacing their windows over and over again the last several years.
I have friends in the gay community, and they said to me, Rick, you know what's scary about this whole thing is the way people talk about COVID, or the reaction to it, or even, if they supported Donald Trump. They said the way they talk about that is what scares us is that's how people used to talk about being gay 15 and 20 years ago. And they said that we're moving backwards. And that's what's really scary, that here in Oregon, which is a very independent minded state, or used to be. Now all of a sudden it's toe the line or you're killing people. And so
Yeah.
as a representative, you maybe your headline might be, in the midst of all this going on, Tim LeMaster demands to sit down and talk with Governor Brown or about the response. He wants to call a
Yeah,
special,
I absolutely
something
would. I
where
mean,
you're, you know,
honestly, if I was in that situation with that coming up, I mean, I would reach out to whatever platforms I would have. And
right,
it still kind of confounds me again. There were thousands of people, and I was down there with them to see for myself what's going on downtown and the tear gas and everything. And one of the things that confounds me is, this. I mean, it's pretty amazing, just the mass of people and the dynamic of this big. The masses are speaking, but at the same time, I'm looking at like your children's educations has been stopped, and nobody's no people have to whisper if they agree with that,
right.
and that really strikes me, because if anything was worth storming the Capitol, not letting your kids have an education, to me seems like that would have been worthy of rallying for. And it is disappointing that there's this, like, well, that's just kind of the way it is type of thing, when
Right.
like
It's,
it's
I,
hard for me to understand that duplicity, what seems to me to be that duplicity.
I think people are starting to wake up in Oregon. And I think one of the things is what you hear is, well, that's just Oregon. Well, no, you know
Yeah.
what? That's not just Oregon.
Yeah.
That's
um
not that's not what Oregonians do. They don't force you to toe the line on one ideology. And that's
sure.
why I encourage people to vote for someone different, because I don't want a super majority of the Republicans either, because that's just
No,
as
no.
dangerous. But right now, they have they have gerrymandered things for decades, and it is so out of balance that it does not represent all Oregonians. And people that say, well, that's what we have. Because right now, what they need to take into consideration is there are more non-affiliated voters than there are
Yes.
Democrats in Oregon right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, part of what I have to break through is being labeled as a Republican. And for me, honestly, I've really for me, when I first came to Oregon 9 years ago, I was actually registered. I registered as a libertarian. And at that time, you probably know, because I know you're pretty abreast of that. It was this weird shambles. I come to learn, these two libertarian parties. I don't even know. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
screw that. And diversity of opinion. I actually registered as a Democrat to vote for Bernie Sanders in the primaries. I mean, as a Republican at that point, things were already set. My vote doesn't mean anything. But you know what? I really wanted that real conversation between someone like Bernie, who I do sincerely believe embodies true Democrat values and vision, and is very articulate and blunt in what he says, frank about what he says. And I was hoping to get, potentially a more established politician on the right, and it all went crazy. But to have that real conversation, and to me, that's what it should be, is let's just lay the cards out and have the discussion.
Right.
And with the way things are, the one party lopsided, especially when I come to learn 18 years, nobody's running the seat. That's bad no matter where you are, who you are. Like, you need to have those conversations. I fully expect, I would be disappointed if I didn't have a Republican challenger in 2 years after my time is here to potentially run for office again. I mean, that would be dismaying. Everybody should encourage. And that's actually, in a lot of ways, though, as much as we're talking about how tough and difficult and crazy things can be here with the blue, it has been wonderful, because it's kind of scary knocking the doors. And there's been a lot more, even people that said, well, I probably won't vote for you, but thank you for running,
Right.
and that has happened quite a bit. And that's been wonderful to see.
So
It's these
tell me
crazy
this.
loud voices that dominate.
Tell me this. The last thing I'll ask you, but what have you learned about yourself in doing this, in running?
Um, it's been awesome. I really have it. I have had to really critically think about where I am with positions, and I'm very much want to be mindful of really embracing constitutional values and looking at being really critical of what do I think about positions, and thinking about really trying to how do I reconcile that with trying to be a true constitutional minded person.
Right.
And it's been really interesting. Like, even things I don't necessarily agree with, abortion's always a big topic, and abortion is certainly a very inflammatory one, depending. And there's a there's that aspect. I even grilled governor candidates on this, because there's the will of the people, the consent of the people to govern. You have to have that. And regardless, if your people are not, especially with an abolition of any sort, trying to say you can't have something, if the will of the people is not there, it's simply not going to happen.
Right.
If the will of the people, if they want to freaking get stoned and do meth all day long, and that's just where they are, no amount of rules is going to stop that from happening, and it just creates a mess. So, abortion is a very big issue in Oregon, and it's all the way up to 9 months. And, where's the will of the people on that? And for me, like, that's one, my votes and governance type of situation would be looking at that. I'm not a fan of it, but there's a reality that it has its place in society, and where are the people and what's reasonable to maintain that. And it's still that belief of, the consent of the governed.
Well, and realistically, when you look at the facts, what changed, it's not going to change in Oregon, probably.
Right.
I think the people, they make it such a big deal. And I'm not, I have my opinions about abortion, but I kind of like you. It's like, if the will of the people says this is what they want, well, I'm going to stand back and go, well, my will is something other than that. But let's vote on it and let's see what happens. And in Oregon, that's probably going to, I say to my friends on both camps, this is probably not going to change in Oregon. So, but what bothers me about it is people make that the biggest issue. So I'm not going to vote for Betsy Johnson because she's pro-choice. Well, it's like, you might want to pick some issues like, is she also pro your voice? Is she also pro, I heard you, and what is Tim? Does he believe, what does he believe that you do believe, rather than finding that one thing that you differ on? And that's what's wrong in Oregon right now, is like, you can't be a 1 or 2 issue voter and expect to get anywhere.
And that's really unfortunate, because I have come across that. There was one door in particular that really stood out. I was going to knock on it, but it had all this, do not knock, do not knock. I'm like, okay. And it had a whole bunch of, more or less the things that are strongly indicative of the left, the flags and BLM stuff. And so I'm like, well, let me just leave my information. I'll leave this one alone. And as I'm leaving, the lady opens the door. Oh, hey, what's up? And it's like, oh, okay, well, and we started talking, and we were like eye to eye for about 5 to 10 minutes especially about the homeless issue, the problems, it needs to get fixed, strong decisions, weak government in this, and so on. And we're just right there in sync. All of a sudden she stops, like, well, wait a minute. What party are you running with? And I was like, well, I'll run on the Republican side. Oh, well, I can't vote for you. Well, I guess the voice at the table doesn't need to be heard. There's that. Right. Here we are agreeing on stuff, and they're just mapping it into this, there's only 2 ideas in the world, and well, I can't be behind that one. And the only way that anything is going to shape and change is for people to look around. And that's one thing for me. I think I've got lots of liberal friends. I love liberal sensibilities. I like to call myself a South Park conservative, if you ever heard that one. They're like, well, there's rules, but leave people alone. They always have their morals at the end of the story. And I think that's a great way to describe me. There is a quote. I'd like to get this quote in there.
Okay.
Gentlemen, that at the federal level, I'm a libertarian. At the state level, I'm a Republican. At the local level, I'm a Democrat. And with my friends and family, I'm a socialist. And in that, he's just pointing out more or less how ridiculous this 2-party thing is, because you can be way more complicated than that and have strong beliefs different beliefs at all those levels for that reason. The most powerful government should be your local government, and that's because you can literally reach out and knock on their door.
Right. Tim LeMaster, again, running for the House District 43 in Portland. Dude, you got balls. I gotta tell you.
Like I said, people have been real supportive, and it's been wonderful in that respect.
Well, good, and good luck to you. And again, I'll be watching from Montana to see how things are going. It's going to be an interesting night, and I'll be looking now, because I know you. I'll be looking to see what you do, and I really wish you well. I hope you do well. But I'll tell you what: when I lost, you go back, and it's hard because you put so much time into it. But then you go back and you go, "Wow, what I learned is you can't learn this." There's nobody that can teach you what you're getting. And I had a guy who lost the race as Secretary of State to me. And he said, Rick, what you got to remember, he was a Democrat and he was another Rick. And he said, how many people get to run for House District 43? How many people get to run for Secretary of State? You did it. And, and I bet you'll be back for something else. If you don't win this one, you'll probably be back for another try. But you know what? You'll be involved in a way that you're never going to stop being involved.
Absolutely.
Because you care about this end. And I really like the way you are.
And do you appreciate the voice? There's a vacuum here since you left. It was really nice having your light, relatively nonpartisan view and on the local stuff. And it's I'm hungering for it. I found some other folks that are working with that, and you left some big shoes to fill out here. And I'm happy for your success too. I mean,
well, we're still going to do the Oregon thing, but what's really interesting is I think I'm going to divide it out, and I'll have Montana stuff and Oregon stuff because it's
awesome.
I'm getting my fill. But I'm doing a bunch of stuff with the timber industry on forest fires, and I'm finding Montana issues are the same as Oregon, but Montana's kind of moving and getting somewhere. So I'm going to start showing Oregon people how they're actually working with the environmental community and the Forest Service and getting along really well. And it's not this, I mean, there's still some of that, but the litigation is getting less. And who knows? I don't know. I don't plan any of that stuff out. You just kind of do what you're going to do. But I thank you for reaching out to me, and I will share this on my stuff, and you share it with your friends as well.
Have a good day, sir. Thank you.
All right. See you later, Tim. All right. And we'll be having more interviews with other candidates. So you can just check out our page. You can go to my website. It'll be on my website, rickdancer.com. Go find out. For years, you've been asking, how do we find out more about people? You just got 30 minutes with a guy who has the guts to run in a seat that nobody's run on the Republican ticket for 18 years. That in Oregon is what I would call a superhero. All right. Take this, share it on your page too, so other people can get to know Tim LeMaster. Even if it's not your district, this is somebody who's running out there who could be part of the state legislature, and a little bit more about him when he comes into office. You just never know what's going to happen. Think